Go ahead and share my slide. Camilla, can you give me a thumbs up if you see that slide? All right. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad that you are here wherever here is for you, and I hope you are warm. Welcome to the first ever panel hosted by the Louisiana Trans Oral History Project. My name is S.L. Ziegler. I am an oral historian with the project. I'm so happy to be here to welcome you here. I have just a couple of things to say before I turn everything over to our amazing panel. First, I want to remind everyone that we agreed to the code of conduct when we registered for this, which states in part, harassment of participants will not be tolerated in any form. If we have a problem, our panelists were kind enough to say that we can follow this plan. We will just shut everything down. We will record our conversation without an audience and send out a link. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but it's good to have a plan. I do want to just take a moment or two to talk about some of the other great things coming up, including our panel next month entitled Tomorrow's History is going to be So Queer, a panel on queer oral histories in which we bring together representatives from projects across the country. So we have Aiden, who started the Transgender Oral History Project of Iowa, Meryl Beam, who works with the Treader Transgender Oral History Project, which is a fantastic resource. Ray Geringer, the founder of Country Queers, which looks for queers outside of cities. It's just also so much fun to see all these farmers raising sheep, raising cows, just great. And Amy McDowell, a neighbor, talking about Queer Mississippi Oral History Project. Really what we want to do is just find out what our neighbors are doing, find out how things are going with them, and be neighborly and be nice. Really looking forward to it. You can learn more about this at louisianatransorohistory.org/events. It'll have all of this information. Our panel in April is so newly formed. I don't even have a fancy graphic for it. Its working title is History is Big Enough for All of Us, Using Trans Oral Histories in the Classroom. We are hoping to really bring everything full circle. And now that we have so many wonderful oral histories, and now that we do know so many great people who are building similar projects, we want to think about how to actually use this. And one of the ways we want to think about how to use it is in the classroom. So we're going to have Kat Jacquet, a historian at LSU, Alex Torres, who works for the just amazing project, Humanities Amped, which works with East Baton Rouge Public Schools, excuse me, and Quinn Champon, an ESL teacher here in East Baton Rouge Parish. Should be absolutely fantastic. I hope you can join us. And you can also, if you visit our fantastic website, see past programs. So I had a conversation with the aforementioned Kat Jacquet, the historian at LSU and all around fantastic person. And we called that conversation, How Do We Get in All Those Fancy Books? A conversation about the history of trans history. And that is, we're thinking about the academic angle and how academic history started to think about trans history. It was good fun. We almost made it all the way through without making each other laugh. I hope you have a chance to see it. And finally, I'm so happy to say that this panel, in fact, all the panels, are funded under a grant from the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, which is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in anything that we do does not necessarily represent those are the National Endowment for the Humanities. I've never made it through that without laughing. We are so thankful for the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, for the funds that make this and so much of our programming possible. That is all I have. I am always at the other side of the email address that sent y'all the registration information today. You can always find information about us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter through our website. We hope you do look into this. And now I'm so happy. This is my favorite part. I finally get to stop talking, Camilla, hand it over to you and sit back and be able to enjoy this wonderful conversation. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Estelle, for that very lively introduction. And really excited about all these upcoming projects you have going on, and thankful for the work that you have poured into this and continue to pour into it. Just a quick introduction. My name is Camilla Marchena. My pronouns are she and ella. I am a native to the New Orleans area. My current role is patient navigator and just all around community health advocate. I work to raise the bar for the healthcare that our community receives and lend myself to wherever I can to see the overall betterment and advancement of our beautiful trans, queer, and gender nonconforming communities. So I want to first of all thank the amazing panel who is here with us today. I know each of you personally, and I'm so excited about this conversation and excited about the brilliance and the wisdom that I know, will be on display here. So just to get us started, a little bit of grounding about, what this panel is going to entail. So it's based around storytelling, right? And storytelling is one of the oldest preservations of humankind's histories. Simply defined, it is the writing or telling of stories, and it can take so many different forms depending on what is being spoken or expressed through an array of mediums. It can also be as informal as two friends chatting about their lives, a story from a dear family member that you hold on to and one day tell your children, or a recollection of an important event in the world's history. As we know, depending on who is speaking or documenting the story, it can shift, it can become biased, or important details can get cut out to uphold certain systems, beliefs, or dominance. When it comes to storytelling regarding trans and queer lives, especially from Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, there are major gaps in the fabric. We know we have been here since the beginning of time. Our ancestors paved the way for us to exist in this world today so that we can thrive and inspire generations to come after us. So what happened to their stories? How can we prevent the erasure of our stories moving forward? Who will document our stories and where will they live so children who need those stories can access them? How do we make sure that they are recorded accurately and beautifully? These are just some of the questions that we'll be discussing in today's panel on storytelling and the preservation of our trans history. So I want to start us off with each panelist introducing themselves, giving us a little background on the work that they do and how storytelling plays a role in your life personally or professionally. And I just will give it over to whoever wants to start off.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Fox. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a member of community for so many years, even when I didn't even know there was a community. I'm born and raised in New Orleans. This is my home, the only life I know. I am a member of Tidal, and I'm also a member of SAGE. And I find, and I think that it's very important that our stories are told because everyone has a past and everyone has a story to tell. And all our stories are so important that we need to share them with those who are coming behind us to let them know of our experiences that we had to go through to navigate through the process of being part of the community. So I think it's very important that we have an opportunity to share our stories with others. And I'm going to pass it off to Sultana.
Thank you, Ms. T. My name is Sultana Isham. I am a film composer and a scholar. Most of my work is history-based, Black history specifically, Black women history, which obviously includes Black trans women. And yeah, memory is wealth. I write about this often. And it's really important to know your history. It gives you a level of confidence that no one can take away from you, and allows you to go into certain spaces to transcend so many different barriers. So history is wealth. And for me, it's really important that other Black people recognize that Black trans history is their history, and making this accessible to them, and also creating our own language that is free from the dominant narrative, because often we have to change how we speak in certain spaces. And a lot of my work is also about like just keeping our language intact, our dialect intact, and not allowing other forces to tell us how to speak. And I will pass this off to Nia.
Hey y'all, my name is Natalie Nia Falk. This is family, so y'all can definitely call me Nia. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns as well. Yeah, and I'm born in Lafayette, Louisiana, and spent the last 10 years of my life in New Orleans. And so, yeah, I'm a oral historian. I co-direct a local trans oral history project called Last Call. I'm also a performer. I'm also a cultural worker / healer. Also here representing Alternate Roots, which is a regional organization that meets at the intersections of arts and activism. And very much like, well, I guess pretty much every one of the other panelists, we have intersecting lives, consistently building with each other. So yeah, just general community help. And so I think this particularly is so important, talking about oral history, because it tells, and the roles that it plays in my life are, it's what I do, it's what I've studied. It's a deep practice of passing, like it's a cultural practice. So it's something that people who came before me did, and something that I am called to continue to do. I think it's how we tell our stories from positions of power. And I think it's how we shape our narrative and our individual narrative too, right? So there's a specific journey around becoming who you are as a trans person that's really important for you to remember, so you can know where you've been, and so you can share with other people too, right? So I think oral history specifically is a cultural practice. It allows us to tell our stories from positions of power as the experts. And I think it's really cool in mapping out our like transition journey and reminding us of where we've come from to allow us to shape who we want to be, obviously. And I'm gonna pass it to my boo, Aurelie. Oh, she might not be able to unmute herself, so the host might have to unmute her.
I apologize. You should be, okay, you look unmuted now.
Hey everybody, my name is Areli. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a trans Latina activist. I born in Honduras and grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. I come to New Orleans when I was like 10 years old, and since there I've been living here. And I'm an organizer from Breakout, actually working with the Bikes to Ice campaign. And I think why it's important for us to share our history. I think most of our panelists have said a lot, you have said almost everything, but what I can share is that it's important for us to share our history because we are the ones who have been living there. I think it's important for us to share those with the one who coming behind us from our young people, and also to keep in mind and reminding us how far we have been coming and how far we have to keep going. You know, the change that we have been doing and the things that we need to keep doing them. So I think that's why it's important to keep our histories and share them.
I think Camilla is frozen.
She's frozen so pretty though. Look at her. And I wonder if we talk
I
about,
think I passed it to, I think I can see their name on the screen though.
I think that might have been the last of the lovely panelists. I wonder if we talk about how vital storytelling is to the trans community. Oh, never mind. There we go. There we go.
Okay, I'm so sorry, y'all. I just got kicked out. Woo. For those amazing introductions and giving us, giving us all that history behind the work that you do. So I want to start off with the question. Each of you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I would love to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about why specifically storytelling is so vital for trans and gender nonconforming community. You know, why do we want to document, you know, what's the importance of documenting it? And, you know, how is this really going to serve, you know, the people that come, you know, after us? Because I think a few of you touched on that as well. And that to me is like that vision is really beautiful to me. And it's something I wish I had as, you know, a trans and queer youth. Yeah, and whoever just wants to go for it.
I agree with you because, you know, I was not really familiar with trans history, your Marsha P. and your Siri Rivera, until actually recently, you know, because none of that was actually, I never was exposed to that, you know, until I became involved in community because I lived a very stealth life. So I wasn't involved with all the trans activities and the different the history of trans community until recently. And it's amazing to find that we have so much history and these stories need to be told, because to see the struggle that what they had to go through for us to be able to be alive today, you know, it's almost like being compared to slavery. The slaves had to go through, and the civil rights, but all those people had to go through for just for Black people to vote. So when you look at the trans history of our trans sisters and those in the trans community, the things that they went through for us to be able to walk down the streets with our partners or to even to be married, you know, it's just amazing that the struggle that they went through for us, just for us to be alive, to be able to be alive.
Yes, Mama Taryn. Yeah. And I'll just piggybacking off of that, like what you just said makes so much sense. Like the fact, so in some ways it's like the slavery history, but it is like the slavery history. And I think Sultana was touching upon that too, about how like we've been there, we've been part of these communities. And I think one thing that trans oral history does, it reminds us that actually trans people were at the center of the caretaking and of the healing. We were the Sha people, or shaman, if you want to use that word. We were the people who were doing some of the magic work. And even if you want to talk about like eunuchs and all these other things, right? We were the people who were in high regard. And there's been like an erasure of that. And so I think what's really vital for our own, like the confidence, I think that Sultana talked about, or just the pride, is reminding ourselves that we have a rich history of being at the center of thriving communities, of bringing magic to the communities that we're part of. And that rich history is being passed down to us like spiritually through our DNA, or spiritually through our energy, but then like biologically through our DNA too. So just a reminding of the erasure of the gloriousness that it is to be trans, like throughout time, I think is really important and vital.
And I think this is like putting on my mind about how important it is to keep our history and to like record those and to making sure we share those, because like we can teach or people or young people can know like we've been here and we've been fighting, we have rights and stuff like that. I remember a time when I was like 12, 13 years old, I was a trans Latina migrant woman living in New Orleans without speaking Spanish. It was no like history. It was nothing about trans Latinx undocumented woman living on New Orleans. And I think it was a lot of things like that I didn't know till I come to break out. Like I didn't know that I was having rights. I didn't know that I had to fight, that I have a community who was holding my back and all those stuff. And I think at that moment, if I will know that, I think I will grow up more powerful with more like knowledge about what I was doing at the moment when I was young. But because I don't have those tools, like I had to just transition it out the however way I want or however way I can do it, because I don't have access to nothing. I don't have access to history, to community, and nothing. So I think that's one of the important things, to keep our histories and to keep the recording and sharing like often, so our community can know that they have a community behind holding them back and they can always come to us.
Yeah, we were talking about our history and the erasure of it. I mean, there's just so much that could be said about that. And trying to figure out where to start. But I guess I can just start with like our history goes back further than the 80s and the 70s. I personally am not rooted in the history that is projected up there that I'm supposed to root myself in. So I am more aligned with stories that I feel like I see myself in, because I feel a lot of the time we're like foisted to like adopt certain narratives that we actually don't relate to. I feel that way. And I don't like that. And the same system that has erased my history is trying to tell me who I am. So that system is not trustworthy. And like, to be honest, I have, from a scholarly standpoint and just as a human standpoint, I have a lot of animosity towards the rhetoric that is out there. So it's just so much misinformation. There's a lot of inaccuracies and there's a lot of ethnocentrism. And so, and like, you know, the language is another thing because it's constantly changing. Like Ms. T was saying, you were learning this almost like it's from an outsider almost, when this is your lived experience, and people who did not live your life are telling you how to speak and telling you how to tell your story, and also telling you what you look like. And that is very damaging, and that has done so much damage on how we see ourselves. So we've been here forever. And I would prefer to go further back. I've talked about Francis Thompson, just a super brief analysis of this person. Francis Thompson was born in the 1800s. And she was one of the 5 Black women who testified in court during the Memphis riots that was very instrumental in establishing the Reconstruction era. So when we were talking earlier about, oh, these people that we've been told to revere fought for us to do certain things, that's gone back even further than that. And citing ourselves under that specific narrative is not really helping us. And it's not really building bridges, and it's not really affirming our womanhood. So a story like Francis is actually more affirming, and I can relate to that much better than the one that I'm supposed to root myself under. And also like showing the bridges that were being made and how like that's different now, and that's been adding a lot of confusion. And so Frances Thompson spoke out in court. She was born enslaved, and she had been free for a little while. And her roommate testified in court because they were raped and beaten during the Memphis riots from white assailants and police officers who killed and burnt down homes and churches and so many institutions that were there. And her testimony was super prominent because it established US citizenship for all Black people. So this builds so many bridges. This invites Black people into their own narrative of expanding how we see ourselves. It builds a bridge with the immigrant community because we have had to go through experiences of showing your papers and not being seen as actual citizens of this country. And the reason why we have our citizenship as Black Americans specifically is because of Francis Thompson. And that is much more powerful than making up some lie. And that builds bridges that is actually more affirming to our womanhood and helps us be seen by our individual communities. So for me, that is really important. And it goes back even further. Elena de Céspedes, who was born in the 16th century in Granada, who was born enslaved as well. And he is labeled as the first female doctor in Spain. And when he was in his 20s, after he had a child, there's so many, the labels and the labeling of these people is constantly changing. I don't like to be an ethnocentrist. I like to use the words that they use to describe themselves. So like, for instance, Marsha P. Johnson called himself because they use he and she pronouns. And I feel like it is important that we respect how they saw themselves and how they see themselves instead of changing things up so that way you can still feel like you're still being seen. That's a problem. And that is affecting how we see trans women. So Frances called herself a woman. Marsha P. Johnson called themselves other things that I don't really relate to. And Elena de Céspedes lived as a man, and he grew into manhood and married a woman and was working as a doctor in Spain. And there were some rumors going around saying that, this is a little suspicious. And they, like Frances, they put him under in a medical examination. And he passed this medical examination with a few like sparkles in the background. And eventually they later found out that he was, there's a lot of words that people can use to describe him. Some people say trans man, some people say intersex, some people say non-binary. I mean, I don't want to go too into the that, because like I said, he lived as a man. His name was Leonardo Cespedes, and I thought we should just honor that. And so when they found out about his wholeness, they stripped him of his ability to make a living as a doctor, and they made him work for free, and they analogized him with witchcraft. So this history of like trans people being magical and things like that, that has historical context. And I think it's a little damaging because trans people, I mean, magical people don't have bills. Magical people don't experience the level of discrimination. Magical people are always of service to other people. Meanwhile, we're being left behind without our needs, and we don't even have control over our narrative anymore. So, sorry, I know I took up a lot of space just then, but that's what I have to say so far.
No, and I think that was super important. I'm glad you took up that space too. And like the one thing I want to offer too is that the limited narratives that we have access to is why oral history is so important. Without people like you doing research on Francis, or even telling us the story that you just told us, like we would have very limited. So people have certain, like we have access to very limited history. So what people try and cling on to, I feel like that can be attributed to that. Like people cling on to Marsha and cling on to the things they've learned because they have there's such little documentation of our story.
I think that's part of it, but I also see it as we live in a capitalist society. And the reason why that narrative is pushed out because it's more profitable, honestly. And there are images that can support it, and they use these images to support their agendas, their pockets. And this agenda is not really helping us being seen as who we are. So there is a capitalist, there's capitalism involved in this narration of our narrative as well.
Yes, Ashe.
Absolutely. Sultana, could you maybe touch upon, like, for you, obviously it's been a journey to find Francis Thompson, right? And like Nia was saying, we don't have, we have a very limited, examples, and we do like adopt these like narratives. Could you maybe talk about how, the path that you took to find Frances and how you felt connected to her story. And that really for me, like, I feel like that's going to be a model for, younger trans folks to maybe do some of that, like, searching for people who they feel more connected to or stories that they feel more connected to create that narrative that isn't just one that is forced upon us. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, of course. It was a long process, many years. And I think it just starts with just being honest. People always, I think the word choice comes up way too often when we talk about trans people. And for me, the only choice I made was to be honest. And that's it. That was like, that's where it started, that's where it ended. And with that, I had to like critically think of what I was being told and being honest with how I was feeling when I was receiving this information from someone who was not me, telling me who I was. So I was really confused, honestly, when I wouldn't say confused. That's not the right word. I was, maybe I was confused. I was confused when I was being voiced at this narrative of being told who I was from someone who looked nothing like me, didn't have the same experiences as me, but they're trying to tell me that this person over here is you. And that just was not resonating with me. And I guess because I'm a classical trained violinist, I'm really deep in the classical world as a composer. So this is like a common practice. This is just a part of our history. All classical musicians are scholars. All of us have trained to be historians. All of us, this is like a practice. This is part of it. And so I think I was just using those same skills that I learned in that world to understand how I saw myself. And yeah, and I think I was kind of quiet for a long time. I think I was just pretty quiet. And I was just like kind of staying focused on my goals that I need to make for myself. And I remember the first time I typed and I knew that I just intuitively felt that Frances was there. And I felt like I was called to look for her, honestly. And I remember the first time I was looking for her, and I think it was maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. And I typed in lazily in the Google search, Black translate. And all I got was porn. And I thought that was really, really deep. And that's a whole other conversation of like, you know, what type of images that we see of that narrative too. That's a different conversation. But I thought that was really, really deep. And I found some things, and as I was reading it, I thought I was reading something that was historical. And as I was reading, I was like, oh, this is smut. This is not, they made it look a certain way, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't real. So it was just after years of looking for her. And actually the first time I heard of Frances Thompson, I did not know that she was trans, because there are some people are not being honest. And I have witnessed scholarship from other women scholars, women who are not trans, talk about Frances, and they would not mention what happened when she was fined and gender policed, and like all the things that happened to her 10 years after she testified in court. And when they stripped her of her truth and they delegitimized all Black pain from white supremacists because this person was not cisgendered. So they used that as an excuse to discredit white violence on Black people. And that has divided us. And even, so there's a lot of cis women who actually know who Frances Thompson is. They just won't tell you that she's trans. So that's another problem too. And I didn't know that she was trans until maybe a little bit afterwards, because I read an article about her. It was a really super short article about her in the New York Times. They never mentioned any of the complexities that happened to her. They just mentioned, oh, this person is responsible for us having citizenship, basically. And like the history of Black women who spoke out against sexual violence during the post-emancipation. And then when I was reading more about her, that's when I discovered all the things that happened to her afterwards. And I kind of felt like, wow, nobody told me this, but they keep bringing up this other person who I cannot relate to at all. And I don't want it, like, if you can relate to them, I want you to be able to relate to them. But the thing is that you can relate to them by yourself and with other people like that. And I can still relate to who I can relate to. And we can stand on our own, and we can stand together and support each other, but I can still stand on my own. So I think that was a process, like learning that I can stand on my own, that we can stand on our own.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, a few things came up for me when you were like speaking, but one thing is like, you know, you kind of said that like you had to like sit with yourself and like be quiet, and, you know, kind of do that internal work. And, you know, I feel like when we do, you know, step into our truth or are honest with ourselves, you know, we kind of have to put on a show for people. And like, we have to be able to say, this is how I felt, and, you know, really adopt this like very mainstream idea of what being trans is, so that we can access the things that we need, right? And, you know, and if we don't adopt that, then like, you know, you're othered and people start to like question you and your mental health even. Yeah, it's really wild, you know, what we have to go through. But two, I also wanna, you know, kind of talk about how do we prevent this erasure, right, of how they did that to Frances? Like, how do we prevent that from happening to us? You know, or to, you know, when we find other trans people in history, you know, that's why the storytelling and, you know, recording it is so important, because it will be so much more accurate than, you know, as we've seen what can happen. So yeah, I just would love to hear what people's ideas are about, you know, recording our stories accurately, beautifully, taking ownership of our own narratives, and you know, and then for whatever purpose, you know, what purpose do you want it to serve?
Mhm.
I know that was a lot. You don't have to answer all of that.
Well, I think I think that was like a lot, but so necessary to ask. And I think of how like Last Call got started, which is the oral history project that I co-direct with someone, well, with the beautiful and amazing Indy Mitchell. It got started because there was just these disappearing like dyke bars in New Orleans, right? And there were folks who were like, we don't like these used to be all around like a specific street called Claiborne, all throughout downtown. There was these like Black and sometimes non-Black like bars that were just for these people. And so their last one closed recently, and they were like, oh, well, we actually have to record this so we can have this memory. And so what that makes me think of is the things that we need to do in order to amplify is to record, to document, so we don't forget that we are worthy of these beautiful things, we're thriving. And we need to record them in like their fullness too. So one of the things I loved about doing the Last Call stories, that we get to hear people's stories, like in their like the full gamut. It's not just stories of like struggle. It's not just stories and narratives of death. It's narratives of joy, success, victory. We interviewed Mama Tara Lynn. We got to hear about her like, you know, grand prize from this continental win. So like being able to tell our stories, but tell our stories in fullness that like kind of humanizes in ways too. I love the idea of we're not just these like floating magic beings, right? To come and like, I love that you said that, Sultana, to come and bless people's lives. But we're also not just people who are rooted in struggle. And so I think the way we do that is tell our full like whole stories, and then we amplify them in any way we can. One of my favorite things about Last Call is that we will document the oral histories, and then we have some creative output for them. So it can happen in a few different ways. Sometimes it's through like books, sometimes it's through theater performances. So we'll use the oral histories as as creative seeds to turn into a theater piece. And sometimes it's podcasts. Sometimes it's just us interviewing someone and turning it into a podcast. The idea of like public history is what I'm thinking of right now, making history that's easily interfaceable with the public. And I think that's the best way for us to not be erased, for us to tell our stories and provide in many outlets that people can engage with, and to do it in ways that feel fun and skill build. So when we teach other trans folks how to do oral histories, we also teach them how to audio edit. So they're also learning how to maybe make a podcast or maybe even make a song if they want to. So teaching our people how to be engaging with their history, giving them the skills that they need to find out how to do deeper inquiry on something, but also to audio edit, to perform better. How can we tie it into people's deep desires and create like more public history in general is one way to not keep it erased, right? And to tell full, long, joyous struggles, successes, victories, the full story of what it means to be trans, like in this current moment for that particular person is one way.
And when you have the history that's documented, you know, orally or audibly, you know, it goes without misinterpretation. There's no way that someone can misinterpret, you know, or say that was a lie. You know, when you have the history documented, you can go back to fall back on that as a reference and say, no, this is what happened. This is, you know, this is what occurred. This is how they lived. This is how they survived. This is how the struggle. You know, so when you have that documentation, it's just something to, as a reference, you know, to fall back upon, you know, for others to, as a guide, you know, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the things that highlight for me to like recording or to document that oral history, like you say, is like just to teach people and to teach the community that how much we join our life, how much we join to be who we are. Like we have a hard and good time, but we join because I can tell for myself, like I've been going through like a lot of hard times and good time, crying, smiling, but at the end of the day, and I realized that I really join who I am, and I love like how they feel to wake up every morning and just be me and doing my makeup or just be me and walk down to see my friends, family, and just for people to listen to my voice, how much I was enjoying the what I was doing or who I am.
I think what causes us, I think the erasure is mostly rooted in shame. from my perspective, a lot of it is shame. And from a historical standpoint, when Frances was outed publicly 10 years after her testimony, they ran campaigns across the entire country. Her arrest influenced the presidential election of 1877. It ended all federal support and our advancement. And Reconstruction, people don't talk about that, but Reconstruction, we had integrated schools 100 years before Ruby Bridges. You know, like, this is very powerful. We had scientists and governors and teachers and so many different things. We were making more progress then than we are really right now. And all of that is because of the union of all types of Black women. And when they shamed her publicly, that Black women paid the price first. And her roommate Lucy Tibbs was called out in public in the newspaper and analogizing them with a lot of horrible things. And that has built a lot of shame, and that has like disrupted the sisterhood, and also gives a lot of historical context to the constant witch hunt on Black women who transgress gender norms. We see this over and over and over again. We see this over and over and over again. So I don't even have to say any names because I'm sure you can name like 5 right now. And that has historical context. And I even think of the women who came before us, who I guess came into the woodwork. That's part of like some old language that I've heard some elders use. And, you know, so when they reach their truth and they, you know, you're shamed into it. So you're not going to really share this information to the next generation, really. Like, how are you going to continue that line when you're hiding?
Oh my God, I'm in love with that too. And then shame on us, and then like shame on like them too, like shame inwardly and shame externally too. Like, yeah, I think there's a lot in whiteness that says we have to, what do they call it, cognitive dissonance, whenever they have to like, like the truth is too much for them to take, so they have to create this alternate reality around like who actually created it, or who actually is moving or doing the certain things. And so shame on them too for not being able to admit.
Yeah, the shame should be on them.
I love that. Yeah.
Even like Fernanda Fernandez, who was a nun in Spain, and she, I'll say she for now, but she was a nun and she grew a penis. And she was talking to her superiors and like had a medical examination, and she asked, or they asked, to be removed from being a nun, something that she worked hard for. And we don't know what came of this person after they left. Like, I don't know if they lived as a man. Like, I don't know if they continued to look like, I don't know. So there's a lot of gaps.
I wonder too, like, if that shame that like people felt is why, you know, so many of our ancestors felt the need to be stealth, right? To not come forward with their truth in any kind of public, you know, documented way. And, you know, and so much of that like generational trauma is still things that like, maybe I don't quite like, I haven't had to navigate as much, but I still feel it, you know, and it comes up in everyday situations where I'm like, you know, it might not even be relevant, but I can still feel it, right? That shame. And as much as, you know, I love myself and I love my transness, you know, it creeps up. It really does creep up sometime. And spaces like this are really what keep me lifted and motivated to not feel shame around it and to celebrate it more. So thank you so much, everyone, for all of this. I don't think we'll ever really, you know the impact that it has for each of us and for those who will watch this afterwards. I'm trying to think. So we have about like 10 minutes left. I'm wondering, you know, if anyone in the audience maybe has any questions that they would like to ask the panel.
I would like to say this, you know, many years ago, the Times-Picayune did an article, and the article was entitled, "Who's Terry?" And they followed me for months. And when I did the story, it wasn't that I was ashamed, it was a more fear of living my truth and being accepted in that truth. And once the article came out, it was so liberating, because at that time I didn't consider myself to be trans. I considered us to be male, female, you know. And when the article came out and everyone knew, it was so liberating. I took that power from them. And I think that when we're talking about being afraid or being ashamed, I don't know if it was being shamed or just being out of fear, living in fear.
Mhm.
If that makes any sense.
I totally get that. Totally
Mhm.
get that.
Yeah. I definitely feel like it's a really, yeah, it's a combination of both, right? The shame that is projected onto us, but also the fear of, right, like finally living openly. And yeah, just going against everything that we've learned or been conditioned to.
Mhm.
And I think too, I'm like, whenever we have conversations like this, it allows us to dive deeper every time. Like the first conversation for me is like, oh, I'm scared to look like this, or I'm scared to dress like this. And then like the conversation like, then we get to figure out what's beyond that. And now we're like to a place where we're like, oh, it's actually like, even just this conversation, I feel like where I've been at before with these types of conversations is like, oh, I need to make sure I have my face on before I get onto a camera. And that's about like feeling shame of not being film enough or not being performing womanhood enough. And just now, it just allowed us to get to a deeper level of it's actually this combination of fear and shame. And that's why I feel like the oral history and like having these kind of conversations allows us to dive deep into the complexities. And that's what I love about it so much. One last project while you're reading the questions, Camilla, I want to shout out to Breakout for doing one of the first oral history projects I had seen, which was called Say My Name, Say My Name. And it basically chronicled 5 Black trans women's lives and transitions who were from New Orleans. And so Breakout has, just super thankful for that rich history of like people telling their stories from positions of power, taking these 5 Black trans artists on tour to Jackson, to Philadelphia, to New York. And it was also a theater performance too. And that just goes to say that history and oral history performance looks like so many different things.
We have a question from Sally. Has anyone done a study to find out how we went from being the priestesses of the temples to hiding our true selves? So where was that shift, where we're revered within communities? I've heard this in, other communities as well, or other cultures. And, to, becoming, having to become stealth or not open about, the multiple truths that we carry. Do you have any insight on that, Nia?
I mean, I don't necessarily know the exact moment, but I can assume it has a lot to do with like colonialism, and like, like whiteness. Oops, my alarm is going off. I'm like, oh wait, I think it's my brother. I'm like, wait, I hope no one is about to come bop me. I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming it has a lot to do with like colonialism, and with a lot of the ways that like our norms were kind of forced to be replaced and we had to practice them in private. So basically, I think the more and more colonialism pushed out our old traditions and our cultural norms and forced us to practice them in private, I think the more and more some of that stuff kind of crept in, like colonialism, including like patriarchy. The more that men have to be seen as like the dominant thing, and the more that whiteness has to be seen as the dominant thing, the less likely like anything that kind of pushes up against what patriarchy is allowed to actually exist in its true form. And so like just like men become trapped. I guess that's all I'll say. Let me attend to this out.
Thank you, Nia. Yeah, so, and just to, bring it back a little bit, thank you, Sultana, for putting those names in the chat. So, with the Trans Oral History Project, I think one of the beauties of it is, being able to describe our stories, you know, authentically, taking control of our narratives, right? And Nia touched upon this earlier, was, you know, being able to see like how far we've come, right? You know, in our own like individual journeys. And then, you know, I think with all the folks that we have talked about today, even, you know, people that we have on the panel, how those stories are interconnected, or how we can feel more empowered through, you know, these different histories that we're learning about. And, you know, really I feel like a well of knowledge that we're like, you know, we're just now tapping it, well, just tapping into, if we don't have that background, that, you know, that academic background, or some of those like tools to access, you know, these people. So yeah, really, really all around grateful for it, and for this conversation. And yeah, do we have any more questions for the panel, or?
And the last thing I'll add to Camilla, is just one last like kudos to oral history, because I just think it's so phenomenal. Just for folks who are doing, I don't know how much of this this is like academic for folks, or curatory for folks. All the things are important, obviously, but just for anyone who's doing movement work, I think you should document it in all the ways, including oral history, because it plants the seeds for how we can adapt our movements and shift our movements. So doing movement history is like really important, and now allowing people to co-opt our like movements and how they've operated, the strategies we've used. So just for folks to know, yeah, I think whenever you're doing campaigns, whenever you're doing all this other work, make sure that you're documenting it through oral history, because it kind of gives us the gateway forward to how we move our strategies, how they shift and how they need to adapt.
Sultana, when are you dropping your book? That's like, yeah, I agree.
I do have an essay coming out very soon.
So many organizations. Okay. When should we, how would we know about when it comes out?
I'll share it on my media channels. It's going to be in the Flux Journal. Is the scholarly essay about Frances Thompson specifically, but also other things with my scholarship, which is the racialization of sound and gender. So it's really, really, I talk more about this. And even those moments, I think someone was asking, oh, when did it happen? I mean, it was several events. It wasn't just one thing that happened overnight. I mean, as people who are trans, we know this doesn't happen overnight. So like, it's a process, and it's a mental process, a spiritual process, you know, and that influences the physical process. But it's definitely colonization, and they get in their own way. You know, they don't love themselves, you know, and the shame isn't just necessarily just with how you see yourself, but the people who are related to you, they feel shame a lot of the time being connected to people like this. They don't want to be seen with that. A lot of them, not everyone, obviously. So it has them change. It has them be ethnocentric as well. It has them change some things around too. I call it convenient amnesia, you know, things like that. Like they all of a sudden, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm looking at. It was a process, but they get in their own way because they don't love themselves. And for Frances specifically, they used her to discredit, because at that time, rape did not include Black women and girls, or Black people in general. At that time, Frances, Lucy Tibbs, Harriet Armour, I'm blanking all the names right now, but it was 5 total. And at that time, they fought to include Black women and girls into that definition of rape. And when Frances was outed 10 years after her testimony, they also used that as an excuse to discredit male on male violence. I'm like, you're getting in your own way. So this has nothing to do with me. Take me out of it.
So yeah, if any other folks want to drop information about upcoming projects that they have, definitely keep us in the loop. I'm really excited to see what comes out of all of it and to read the article. And I think if we don't have any more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Esal, is there anything you wanted to end on?
I don't have anything to add, but I always love to speak. Thank you everybody for coming to this. Thank you to our panelists. This was amazing. Thank you to everyone who attended. We had a lot of registrants. I'm so glad to see so many people came out on such a wacky week. I'm so glad everybody could make it. Please do stay tuned. Once this recording is available on our YouTube channel, we will send it out to everybody. Watch it, rewatch it, tell your friends. There's so much great content here. Thank you, everybody.
Can we give it up for Camilla and this amazing container holding facilitation of this conversation? I'm just like, wow.
Y'all made my job super easy. Thank you everyone who tuned in. Thank you again to the panelists. You know, every time I chat with y'all, you bring me so much joy and wisdom. And our community is so lucky to have each of you and the work that you do and the joy that you bring to this movement, right? And for expanding our narratives of what it means to be trans and queer, you know, people. So yeah, I think we'll go ahead and end it there. I love each of you, take care, and we'll be seeing each other around.
Bye y'all, so much love.
Bye.
I'll just stick around for a second in case any panelists want to talk. Otherwise, looks like almost everybody's gone. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.